Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another episode of the Pre-Order Bonus Podcast. It's me, Cameron Warren, and I'm joined, as always, by Jacob Price. And we're here to talk about video games. Video games are still cool.
Still cool. Not going away.
I'm still playing them. And in fact, time is a flat circle because the game that I'm playing right now is Breath of the Wild for the Nintendo Switch.
Oh.
So I'm just going to start by apologizing to our listeners that, I'm going to take a couple minutes to talk about Breath of the Wild again. What a good video game,
Kind of feel like you've turned around a little bit. And just for some clarification, I don't think we've done a Zelda episode yet, any Zelda game, but this game is repeatedly coming up, and it was heavily featured in our open world episode that we did about 9 months ago. And then Cameron, I don't think you said it was a bad game by any means, but I walked away from that episode feeling like you didn't love it, or you didn't quite see what all the critics were seeing.
Look, I gave it some honest, we need to criticize and think critically about the things that we love.
Right.
So I picked up Breath of the Wild because I'd never gotten it on Switch. I actually was one of the very few who played it on the Wii U.
That's right. I totally forgot about that.
And I'm one of the few who actually own. In fact, I still have it. I still got my Wii U. It's ready to go. And I own Breath of the Wild on it, so I totally could play. But I was like, you know what? I want this on Switch for just the slight increase in resolution, the slight increase in frames.
Yeah.
And as a dark secret of mine, not really a dark secret, but I never actually finished Breath of the Wild. I never beat it. So
we talked about
that. I did pretty much everything in the game except go and beat Ganon, because when I got to that point, I was just like, yeah, I'm good. And I just never beat it. So I'm committed now. I'm going to beat Breath of the Wild. Mark my words. That's my next gaming goal. I'm really into it. I realize there's a lot of stuff that I never actually did the first time around. Like, I never made potions a single time in my first playthrough. Not a single time.
What?
Not even once.
Like, you didn't even cook?
No, I cooked, but I didn't make potions ever.
Oh, like out of monster parts?
Yeah. Like, for some reason, I just never figured out, you make, potions with the monster parts, and you can get, speed boost and stealth boost and, Anyway, so now I'm playing it, hopefully, the right way. And I'm excited. It's a good video game. It reminded me why it's so much better than Immortals Phoenix Rising. Sorry, Rob. But anyway, we need to do a full episode on it because we talk about it so much. Its time has come.
Then we can lay it to rest until Breath of the Wild 2 comes
And then
out.
we promise to not mention it again for at least a week after that episode. Jake, what have you been playing?
Well, I'm back to my normal self, Cameron. I'm trying to juggle 6 different games. In terms of Zelda, I finally, after thinking about it, talking about it for a few weeks and months, I booted up A Link to the Past. So that Zelda game was on the Switch library online. So I've been playing that. Actually, the game I've been playing most is the game Littlewood, which recently came to Switch. I'm absolutely loving it. Fantastic game. And then on Xbox, I'm sorry, but I bought Dark Souls 1 Remastered. So that's what I'm playing there. Alongside a lot of Desperados 3. I actually have put in way more time into that game than I thought I would.
Oh, awesome.
We're gonna do an episode on that one.
Next week, right?
Next week.
Yep.
So you guys will hear my thoughts then. I've really been surprised by that game, to be honest. So been playing a lot of that. And then I don't know, because Game Pass and X are crazy, I just downloaded 3 different games. Downloaded Undertale, finally gonna play that. I downloaded Skyrim, the special edition. And I enabled the FPS boost.
I mean, I think there's a constitutional law written somewhere that you have to re-download Skyrim at least once a year on at least one platform. I mean, because there's so many now, right? So you just have to. You've never actually played through that one, though, have you?
I mean, yeah, I've played it, but played through it. I think That's a good way of phrasing it. I just got too overwhelmed, honestly, when I first booted it up. I was super Morrowind. Oblivion didn't do it for me. I don't remember why. Um, and then Skyrim, yeah, Skyrim. I was just too overwhelmed. I couldn't tackle it. Right now, I'm feeling like, hey, I'm only playing 5 other games right now. Why not boot up Skyrim? And then the last game is a game that I'm just finished playing, but I actually went back and I played Yoshi's Island on the Nintendo Switch Online. Do you remember that one?
Uh, I never played that one, but I know what you're talking about.
That game holds up extremely well. I was really floored, and I only read it because of some article. I had never even heard of it, to be honest. Some article is pointing out its art style and had some screenshots, and I was like, I want to try that. And I don't really like 2D Mario games, but this, man, my favorite 2D Mario game is Yoshi's Island.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's probably not most people's favorite Mario game, but that's okay.
I mean, I just don't like 2D Mario. Sorry, Super Mario Bros. 3, I think, is probably the one that I would approximate to liking. But like the original Mario games, dude, no. I just suck way too much.
Well, Jake, enough about that on this episode. We are talking about a game called Project Winter, an Xbox Game Pass game on Game Pass for PC and consoles. And this is one that I think is flown under the radar, honestly, for a lot of people. I saw it pop up several months ago on Steam and was pretty intrigued. But given the craze around Among Us, I'm surprised that this one has not gotten more fanfare. Jake, how are we going to talk about Project Winter today?
We will be talking about Project Winter in 4 different ways. In 4 different categories, we're going to dissect this game, the first of which being the narrative. We're going to be talking about the narrative. Now, Cameron's, already made the comparison to Among Us. I think this is maybe a new genre, some sort of term or a term that I wasn't familiar with, actually, until before Project Winter. This is a social deception type game, so we'll be discussing how narrative is used there. After that, we'll be discussing the mechanics. This is the nitty gritty, how you are actually playing the game, how the controls function, what systems are in place. I mean, what are your abilities and limitations, et cetera, et cetera. And these are very crucial in a game like this where the goal is to, remain anonymous when you are the one killing other people. And then category 3, gameplay loop. What's going to bring you back to this game? I mean, it's a social deception game. A lot of it is going to be coming down to your friend group, right? And so we're going to discuss this. I imagine this category will be relatively brief. And then the last one, impact on the industry. I mean, Cameron said it. I mean, games like this are all the rage, and I feel like social deception, since I'm using that term, and party games, they absolutely have their moments and they have space, to really thrive. And these are the types of games that really rope in people that would never consider themselves gamers, right? If it's really easy to download something, especially if it's free, they're much more likely to hop in and have a really good time. So in this final category, we're going to be talking about where Project Winter sits in that discussion and sort of the state of the party game, the state of these types of games right now in 2021.
So let's talk about the narrative, Jake. I think similar to Among Us, there's not really a set in stone narrative here. It's more of a situation, if you will, where you've got a group. One of the group members is a traitor or a defector. I'm trying to remember the terminology is slightly different in this game between Among Us, and I get them mixed up sometimes. But it's just a scenario. You're out in this, what looks like a Alaskan or Canadian or like Rocky Mountain winter snowscape. You're stranded in a cabin, and then you go out and you've got certain objectives to complete, and you need to gather resources in order to complete those objectives. And the end goal is for the survivors to make it onto the helicopter and get away safely. And intermixed with that, there's all various... there's a whole bunch of different there's actually quite a few different game modes. I think when we first played, Jake, we played the simpler game mode or the small map which actually
Yeah.
condenses the mechanics of the game quite a bit, because when we moved to the bigger map, it unlocked like so much more in terms of what there is to do. But
Yeah.
that's really the setting of this game. I actually enjoyed this a lot more than Among Us, not just because of the graphical style. I think the graphical style like does do a little bit more for it, but just because like I don't know, it just did more for me. Like it was just a little bit more narrative-y, a little bit more interesting. Like there's a cabin, you kind of all start in the same place. You know, you've got kind of the nice scenery going on. You've got animals.
Hmm.
It's like it's strange because it's one of those times where I'm like, why is this game not as just dominating Among Us? Because it's doing what Among Us does way better than, in my opinion, than Among Us does it, and has a better setting and a better like structure, in my opinion. But I don't know.
Yeah, this setting is really, I'm trying to think. Early in the podcast, I talked a lot about environmental storytelling. This is really all this game has, I would say.
Yeah.
The setting that you're in uh, says a lot about what's going on. I think in terms of super popular, massively multiplayer games, and I don't mean MMOs, right? I mean games like Fortnite, Battle Royales, Among Us, other party games, Fall Guys. I think Project Winter has the most cohesive narrative in terms of how the environment influences mechanics.
Yep.
So you're in, Cameron's right. I don't even know. It could be Alaska, Canada, Scandinavia, Russia, whatever. You're in this, snow laden area, and blizzards are a really big impact of what's going to happen. So instead of like in Fortnite, it's like, oh, it's a storm. Yeah, can't be in the storm. In Project Winter, a lot of those sort of environmental aspects make a lot more sense of what's happening to the area. For example, you can go to a hot springs, which spawns in every map, and so I think the game is a little more interesting. It does feel a little more alive. You have, like Cameron, you mentioned, you have these animals roaming around, and you can attack them for resources. They can fight back. So the environment itself, yeah, is a little more detail for sure. And I'm with you, Cameron. I like this is a little bit of like a low poly style of graphics,
Yeah.
and I prefer that over. I don't even know what you'd call Among Us, like just like the 2D hand drawn
Yeah.
or
Right.
like computer drawn animated style, whatever
Microsoft
it is.
Paint graphical engine. Is that? No, I'm
uh,
not taking a shot at Among Us. I'm just like they've got a
yeah.
very distinct style, right?
Yeah, no, it really does very, very much look like that. And I'm with you, Cameron. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not my taste either. So I mean, yeah, I think in terms of narrative and art style, there's a little more depth. And Cameron, we're gonna get into this, as we're talking about mechanics, but that depth really carries over into the rest of the game. And that's something that I really feel too as well every time I've played it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could transition there because this is a mechanic heavy game. I mean, that's what this game. This is one of those types of game where the narrative is not front and center. It doesn't
Right.
make that much of a difference. But man, there is a lot of mechanics here. There's a lot to unpack. Where do I start? I mean, you've got the basic structure of survivors, and then one of the survivors is unknown to you and is a traitor. Um, this game is built around proximity voice chat. And so you have to have proximity voice chat to really make it work. And one of the cool, I'll just talk about a couple things, but one of the things that I really thought was cool was the use of walkie-talkies in the game that take advantage of the proximity chat. So if the traders, for example, when they start off, if you're playing with a certain number of people, you'll have two, and they will have a like secret walkie-talkie built in that so they can communicate on a separate channel where nobody hears them talking, and so you can coordinate behind the scenes, which I thought was awesome because it just like adds so much tension where you can like you really truly have to act. You're standing amongst the survivors and you're like, oh yeah, let's go do this objective, and then you hit the button on your keyboard or on your controller and you're like, hey, I'm going to go over here and like pretend to do this thing while you go and gather the resources so we can build mines and go set it on the next objective and like blow up a bunch of people. That just added way more depth and strategery. That's not a word, but I like to use it.
Strategy? Strategery sounds great though. Sounds fancy.
That added way more strategery to me. Like when we played Among Us, you really couldn't even do that unless you set it up yourself. right? Where in this game that was kind of built in to have
Hmm.
like that cooperation, which has made it a lot more fun. That's just one example. I mean, the traders
Yeah.
have like they've got crates around the map. They'll get airdrops with like guns and mines in them, and like I could go on and on. There's a ton of stuff here.
Cameron, I think you're right to start with the communication factor, though. In Among Us, I mean, there's the unspoken rule,
Right.
don't talk during this part,
Yep.
and I mean, Among Us, I think, is very much designed to be played without voice, and it's a mobile game too. I mean,
Right.
so to play over mobile with random people, and you can only text, and it's very much set up for that. When you're playing with people, like we used to play weekly with my nieces and nephews, you have to coordinate, and you got a 4-year-old nephew who's like, so and so just killed me, and you're like,
Right.
bummer, right? So yeah, Project Winter, it definitely takes more setting up, a lot more setting up. But once you get the local chat, all that stuff organized, and you have the walkie talkies, communication does feel really sneaky, and it feels really fun. And the great thing about it is because it's proximity chat, uh, there's no way for people to really guess if you're the traitor because you're quiet. And I think that's really helpful in Project Winter. The mechanics are designed in such a way that you have to really reveal yourself
Right.
as a traitor.
Yep.
There's really no great way of sort of guessing who is a traitor, right? And then, of
You
course,
have
this
to
game,
actually catch someone in the act, right?
yeah,
You have to actually catch them in the act
hmm,
because the traders actually have tools to help them, which
yeah, and so I really like that about this. And then the other major component when it comes to mechanics is just regular survival crafting things. You have a few meters you need to watch; they can't get all the way down, otherwise you get knocked over, and you can die and be out of the match. You need to harvest materials. Materials are crucial because you need to, as survivors, meet certain objectives so that you can leave via helicopter, like you mentioned briefly. And so you have plenty to do, right?
right.
And you're going to be traveling all over the map. You're going to be away from people. You're going to be exploring, and I think that's a huge part of this game too. Is that because, from what I understand, the maps are somewhat procedurally generated so that you can't just go to the exact same locations every single time. Is that right, Cameron?
I'd have to look it up, but I think you're right, Jake. Yeah.
I never felt like you could be like, okay, this time everybody go to the same places you did last time. Like you have to explore. And so I like how that sort of game design there where it's forcing you to separate. You can't just steamroll the map in a group of 8 and give the traders zero chance. Um, Yeah, so lots of timers, lots of meters to watch, lots of resources to gather. You're busy the whole time, and I like that.
Yeah. One of the other mechanics I really like is I just like how many tools the traders have, and this is probably my biggest criticism with games of this. I mean, this kind of feels like an emerging genre. I mean, we have this, we have Among Us. That's been
Hmm.
huge on Twitch. Obviously, I'm surprised. Again, I'm surprised this game has not gotten more. And it may just be because it doesn't have just people just don't know about it. It needs its break or whatever. But the thing I don't like is it's kind of boring being a survivor, to be honest. Uh, because you're just like kind of going around and completing the objectives and sort of hoping to catch the traitor a little bit. I mean, you can have strategies, obviously, like, hey, stick together, like, don't get separated. Hey, we're going to do
Yeah,
things like in a group and, like reinforcing communication and doing all that. But it's like you kind of have to, like you said, Jake, you kind of have to catch the traitors in the act. You can't just like start to make guesses and you kind of have to stay together. I don't love that because it's to me it's so much more fun being the trader, like the coordination and the planning like behind the scenes, and like you have to do all your acting when you're a trader, and like that to me is what this game is. And as a survivor, it seems like you're just participating in the game, you're not actually playing the game. um because I'll give you another example. Like one of the things that the what are they? They're not the defectors. The traders can do is when you
yeah,
kill someone, you can disguise yourself as that person, including their
yeah.
username. So if you can like play correctly, like you could totally kill someone who runs off by themselves, run back and like hang out with the group, not say anything, and totally like pretend to be that person, or catch someone like super by surprise and go
Yeah.
like kill another person. And so anyway, that type of stuff, that's super super fun. I feel like the survivors like maybe need more tools to make it a little bit more engaging. That's probably my one biggest criticism.
Mhm. And I think part of those tools that you're mentioning is that traders have access to trader crates. And in those crates, they typically have very powerful tools. So one I think I found was like a bear trap,
Yep.
which causes a significant chunk of damage, and you can sort of hide it next to a place you know other players are going to be going to. There's a poison trap. A lot of times, a lot of times there are crossbows in there, and they are so difficult to aim. Um, but having that type of ranged weapon is huge because most people are walking around with axes or pickaxes.
Yeah.
So being able to have that range is super
Because that
advantageous.
stuff is tough to build as a survivor. Like it takes a
Yeah,
lot of crafting materials, whereas a defector you can just get that in a random like airdrop.
yeah, and yeah. So crafting is a huge part of it, and you have to craft tools, but you also have to craft different bits like radio pieces, etc., so you can actually access the helicopter. There might be a power generator in there, things like that. And when blizzards come, spend resources to build a fire so you can stay warm, etc. So there's really a ton going on. Cameron, I know what you mean because Project Winter, you can play up to 8 people. And if you have 6 survivors and 2 traders, it can be a little. Wait, I think you could play up to 10. I'm going to have to double check that. Either way, party size is relatively large.
Yeah.
So it's easy to get lost in the fray as a survivor. And so I found the most fun way to play was to find a buddy and stick with that buddy and try to get things done. If you came upon a traitor, you try to kill them and you try to announce it to the rest of your team. We're being attacked and it's so and so, right? Um, but yeah, I get I get that feeling too. There are some matches where it's like so and so's calling all the shots. I'm just gonna go harvest wood and berries until I know I can get on a helicopter.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that takes us into the gameplay loop where I mean, this is very much um like you start off if you're a survivor, your gameplay loop is completely different from the trader. And so you actually kind of have two different games inside of one game where one game is you're just completing objectives and trying to get to the end, but that game feels significantly less, to me anyways, fleshed out compared to being a defector where there's just so much more you can do. You've got that secret
Right.
walkie-talkie, you've got the crates, you've got the airdrops, you've got tunnels that take you to different parts of the map. You can disguise yourself. Survivors, you can build stuff and you can complete objectives. Now you have a team,
Yeah.
and so you're disadvantaged, and that's got to be as a developer. I'm sure that's one of the biggest challenges they face is like, how do you make this fun for the survivors while making it still fair for the defectors and giving them the tools where they can actually have a chance at winning? Because that's the other problem is it's kind of hard to win as a defector. Like it's tough. You got a lot of people you got to take out, and if they're well
Mhm.
coordinated, I could imagine that being really really hard. And so balancing that in terms of the game design has got to be really hard in that loop.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I think in my experience as a trader, there's plenty of times where I could deal like a relatively big setback or deal a massive amount of damage to a player, but to actually win a game is pretty hard. Even with all the things that you're given. If I could land some crossbow shots, maybe I would have won more matches as a trader. Crossbow's so hard to use. It's like a twin stick shooter all of a sudden, and it's just hard to. I don't know. It's really hard. And so I think as a trader, the best I could do is like in the helicopter, 2 people were on there and I was camping out near the helicopter. The rest of the people are rushing to get in, and I'm able to stop somebody in a bear trap and kill them, poison somebody and get in a fight with them, but they're still able to get on the helicopter before it leaves. So yeah, all that to say, being a trader is difficult. Now, Cameron, I want to bring us back to something that you mentioned,
Okay.
and that's that there are 2 maps. There's a small map and the large map.
Yeah.
And this significantly changes the game,
Yeah.
not just because of the size. And the small map is a great introduction to how the game functions. But in the large map, you actually get roles, which means your players will have different abilities, and those abilities are relatively significant. For example, one of the abilities, a survivor can open trader crates, which means a survivor can get access to these super excellent tools. The problem with that is if somebody sees you doing it, they're going to think you're a traitor. So the roles I think are well designed, but they feel really significant as well. And that only takes place in the larger map.
Yeah, the large map like unlocks such a huge part of the game. Like the simple
Yeah.
map, I mean, it's the simple map's almost a little too simple compared to like, I mean, it's probably 20% of what's in the larger map. But I
Yeah.
mean, you can have a medic, you can have a soldier, a scientist, and they all have special abilities. Which again, that brings up that balance question of how do you make the game fun for the defectors? Because in the big map, the survivors have even like we said, it's how do you make it fun for the survivors? Oh, okay, let's give them additional roles where they have special abilities. Well,
Yeah.
then okay, what else do you into the defectors? And I did notice in the big map, like I think the defectors got more like stuff that they could open and stuff that airdrop to them and more weapons and stuff,
Yeah.
but tough balance. And the balance, to be honest, it didn't work super well for me, which is probably why I haven't continued to put a ton of time into this game, because the loop just doesn't hit for me consistently. And when I'm not playing as a defector, I feel kind of bored. I'm like, I'll just go play something else.
Yeah. The gameplay loop for me, I love how you can play up to a ton of people in this game. I'm confident it's 10. Feel like I was playing. Anyway, that's a relatively large party size, and that's relatively rare in the games industry to be
Mm-hmm.
able to play with that many people. So the gameplay loop is really fantastic if you have a solid core group to play with. Otherwise, you're playing with randos, and we know how playing with randos on the internet can be. It can be extremely hit or miss.
I don't think this game works with randos, just flat out. Like, you have to have a friends group, in my opinion.
I think this works 10 times better with a friends group for sure. And I mean, we had a group that was like 7 or 8 people playing, and we played a bit, every night for like a week or so. But as soon as 2 people fall off of that and it drops down to 5 or 6, and somebody says, "Oh, I can't tonight," and your group is looking like 4, the incentive to play is very low. I mean, because you want a lot of people and you want to use the larger map because it has all these really cool additional mechanics. So while this is an awesome, I'm with you, Cameron. I think it's an awesome game. I think it's designed incredibly well. I think it's really hard to keep playing it, which is kind of strange because there is a gameplay loop with cosmetics. Now, if I remember correctly, you can purchase them, or they're achievable if you do like a checklist of tasks in every game that you play. So there's definitely incentive to come back. You could get some really cool looking cosmetics. I was a huge fan of a bunch of them, but without a core group of friends, it's hard to convince yourself to play with a bunch of randos.
Yeah, I think that takes us to talking about the industry impact, and I think that brings up this conversation of this: is this a new genre, Jake? Project Winter, Among Us, is this a new emergent genre? Are we going to see like 10, 15 new games that have been kicked off in the last year, you think?
I mean, I've used 2 terms already. The one that I've seen specifically for Project Winter and Among Us is a social deception game.
Okay.
That seems hyper specific. I think the umbrella term that might be more indicative of what we're seeing right now in the games industry is just party game, right? And that's why I brought up Fall Guys. I think you bring in Fall Guys. BR's like Fortnite isn't quite a party game, right? Um, because of the way that you match make, but there's something there. And I'm more comfortable using party game. I just think there's a place for party games, and what these games are showing us is that people are super interested. They want to do something like this with their friends.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. At the same time, like I'm looking at Twitch right now, and what was Among Us at its height? Like a couple 100,000 viewers, like per day.
At least, I mean,
I mean, right now it's at 10,000 viewers and 9.1 million followers for Among Us versus Project Winter has, 71,000 followers and 160 people watching, so it's not even close.
Hmm.
But I just think, it's tough. It's tough because it's a game that relies on, like you said, it relies on a lot of coordination, a lot of setup. It's got that like streamer virality potential because there's interesting situations that can happen in the scenarios, which is why I think Among Us took off the way that it did, because streamers could just create endless content about, oh, somebody betrayed so and so, and like AOC got on and had 500,000 viewers like on her channel because she was playing Among Us and like deceiving famous streamers and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it has legs, to be honest. If I was a betting man, I just don't know. And the interesting thing is, like, Among Us, they canned Among Us 2, and the developers of Among Us are just focusing on upgrading and kind of building out Among Us 1. So maybe it comes back. Where does Project Winter fit into all that? I don't know. Where does this genre go from here? I don't know. I don't know what the legs are. I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem to have any type of microtransaction model that I can see. Like, Among Us, I think it's $5 on PC, but it's free on mobile.
Free on mobile. Yeah, I think you're getting at two really important factors here. One, the barrier to entry for Project Winter, because it's so mechanics heavy versus other party games versus other social deception games, it's way high. There's a lot going on. First of all, just you have to set up proximity chat, right? Which I think people are like, oh, how do I do this? Like, even people who game all the time, they're like, oh man, how do I switch around these settings? So you have to do that first to make the game function, and then you have to learn the mechanics. And then to get into, the really meaty part of the game on the larger map, you have to learn new mechanics. Whereas a game like Among Us, listen, it had crossplay baked in, right? It's free on mobile. So it's like, hey, have you heard of Among Us? Download it now. It's a tiny game. It's not super graphics heavy. It's simple to learn, difficult to master. And so I think a game like Among Us is, I think has a few things going for it. Those things that I mentioned. Two, people want interaction during a pandemic. And most people have they've got a smartphone and you can play against your friends no matter where you are. So I think it had a lot of things going for it for sure. But I think what these two games indicate is that there's absolutely a place for these types of games that are for people, like I said, who would never consider themselves gamers. You can rope them in quite easily to play a few rounds, have a few laughs for sure, and just call it like that.
I think the disadvantage, and the more and more I think about it, the disadvantage of a game like Project Winter, even though I personally prefer it to Among Us because it has those additional mechanics and things that we've talked about, it doesn't have the same legs as Among Us because the simplicity is not there.
It's not.
Among Us has mobile, and anyone can play it. The mechanics are so deadpan simple, and that's, I think, what made it, that and the streamer stuff made it go viral. So, well, we see. I don't know. So where does it go from here? I'm not sure. Although Twitch, interesting note, just by the way, Jake, Grand Theft Auto 5 currently has 500,000 viewers. That game came out, just so everyone is aware. Sorry, this is just.
It came out 1 million years ago.
That game came out in 2013. It is almost a decade old. It has 500,000 viewers on Twitch. Rockstar doesn't even need to make another video game. Just stop. Anyway, sorry. That's a side note.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think, Project Winter is just too tough to get into it. I mean, it's on Game Pass. This is the type of game that could absolutely take advantage of something like this, where it's like, hey, Game Pass probably has like 20 million subscribers right now.
Yeah.
Say, hey, we got a potential pool of 20 million people to play this game. And I think it's fantastic for something like Game Pass, where it's like, hey, these people are all online. Let's get them playing together with this type of game. And so I'm with you. It has the potential to create a huge stir, lots of buzz. Among Us came out, year and a half, 2 years before it went viral, before it just skyrocketed.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, it could happen to Project Winter too, right? I mean, it's a well-designed game. It's polished. I didn't run into like any bugs or performance issues while playing it. So it could definitely have its moment in the sun. But yeah, like we've said already multiple times, it's an involved game. It has lots of depth. And if people just aren't willing to really sink into it, then they're going to pass over it.
I think there's just too many other options to play with your friends. And that
are simpler
and just easier to jump in. And I think that's ultimately the games that are going to succeed is I'm tired, I'm bored, I want to throw a video game on. I flip on my Xbox. What do I play? Fortnite, Warzone, Among Us. Just something that I can do it. Well, maybe not so much Among Us right now, but
right.
In spite of all that, I do think there's going to be a lot more games like in this category. People are going to continue to make. You're going to see new stuff coming in this category, and so good news for people who really like both of these games is that you're going to see more stuff, and I think you're going to see more sophisticated stuff, and you might even see mechanics of these games come into AAA stuff because it's going to be the same pattern that we saw with PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds.
Yeah.
That was a janky indie first-person shooter that...
I can't believe you used the full name.
Sorry. Just
nobody just says, was it PUBG?
Am I supposed to say PUBG? I forgot I'm supposed to say PUBG.
It just threw me for a loop. I was like, I had to think of what the game was at first.
PUBG, in case anyone's confused, PlayerUnknown. The guy is pretty narcissistic. He put his own name in the title. But anyways, you're going to see the same pattern, right? Where PUBG made Battle Royale go huge. People copied it. AAA copied it. And then, I mean, good grief, you had Fortnite, which was an indie game, become AAA, the most AAA game out there because of the genre. So you're going to see more stuff like that. You're going to see that happen.
Yeah, and I'm all for it. I really am. Even just when I was playing Among Us a lot more with my nieces and nephews, it was a good time to, play with family. And, my wife and I, we've always lived far away from family. So it was a good time just like being able to chat with nieces and nephews, play a silly game, kill 45 minutes, an hour, pretty easy. And because gaming has exploded during the pandemic, there's like a bigger market now than ever, I think, for this type of party game. I mean, we've even seen it with like Jackbox, right? Those types of games. They're not difficult, but it's a good way to get a group of people down and have a few laughs together.
I agree, Jake. With that, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for our episode on Project Winter. That's on Game Pass, again, on PC and Xbox. So no skin off your back if you have Game Pass. Go try that one out. Get a group together. It's a good time. You will have fun. I can guarantee you. Get a group together, especially if you're into Among Us and you've got you've got Game Pass and you were into Among Us. You have no reason, and you had a group that you play that with, no reason not to open this one up. Definitely worth it. Ladies and gentlemen, follow us at PreorderCast on Twitter. Follow Jake at Jacob_ChipTip18. Follow me at Mass Generic. That's 3 S's, Mass Generic. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Mass Generic Gaming. This episode, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on podcast services around the globe, you can also watch live on, not live, you can also watch it on YouTube. You can see our beautiful faces. We appreciate all of you and have a great night.